everybody. This is Aaron Kasnitz, the Baltimore Ravens beat reporter at PennLive.com, the Harrisburg Patriot News. We're going to get right into it. This video is explaining what the Baltimore Ravens can do with Matthew Judon, an outside linebacker, a Pro Bowl outside linebacker who led the team with 9.5 sacks last year, whose contract is set to expire in March. So, the number one thing that the Ravens might do with Matthew Judon, or could consider doing, is signing him to a long-term contract before he gets to free agency, or even signing him, once he gets to free agency. The good thing, the positives that would come from that, is that the Ravens could lock down an important position. They would kind of erase pass rusher, or at least reduce the need at pass rusher, when you talk about offseason needs. The challenges, though, are that the Ravens are famously disciplined in contract negotiations. In the past, they've let players like C.J. Mosley and Zadarius Smith walk, go in free agency to make more money than they would pay them. Right player, right price is kind of the mantra of that front office, started by former GM Ozzie Newsome, continued by current GM Eric DeCosta, and Matthew Judon might not sign a deal unless it's more than what the Ravens value him as, because he could get a lot of money on the open market as a capable pass rusher coming off his first Pro Bowl. So that leads us to number two, the option number two with the Ravens and Matthew Judon. The Ravens could let him walk in free agency. They did this with C.J. Mosley, who was a four-time Pro Bowler at the time. Judon's only been to one Pro Bowl, so nobody's invincible. Yes, the Ravens would like to see a good pass rusher like Judon stick around, but if he's going to get paid way more than they think he's worth on the free agent market, you can just let him go, and then you take that cap space, perhaps get a compensatory pick in the 2021 draft, in that case, for Judon. The drawback of that is that then all of a sudden you're not going to recoup any value until at least 2021, and you got a big hole to fill at outside linebacker. The only returning outside linebackers or edge rushers from last season's team are Jalen Ferguson, who was a rookie last year, and Tyus Bowser, who's really just a situational player. So that's going to be tough for the Ravens. If Judon walks, you got to find a way to fill out that depth chart. Even if you're going to invest heavily in the secondary, and that's the strength of your defense, you still need a few good players in that defensive front, and Judon played more than 80% of the snaps this past season. He was a big part of the Ravens' defense. Now that brings us to the third option, is the franchise tag. And if you are unaware what the franchise tag is, it's a roster-building tool teams can use to keep very good players. If the Ravens place the franchise tag on Judon, and they will be able to do this anytime between February 25th and March 10th, so before free agency arrives, March 18th, if they place the franchise tag on Judon, they would pay him the average of the top 5 linebacker salaries in the NFL, which is projected to be about 16.3 by overthecap.com, 16.3 million by overthecap.com, and keep him for 1 year. The benefit of that would be you're not tying in, this huge amount of long-term money to Judon, but you get to keep him for the 2020 season. Now that would be contingent on Judon signing the tag and playing for that $16.3 million. So that is an option if they could tag Judon and keep him and allow him to play under that tag. The drawback, of course, is that the Ravens right now are projected, before they make cuts, to have about $27 million in cap space. Even after they make cuts, maybe get to 40. Well, $16.3 million, that's a lot of cap space to use on one player, something the Ravens haven't done recently. They haven't used the tag since 2016, when they used it on Justin Tucker. So that's sort of the drawback there, is just that you're giving a lot of cap space to one player in 1 year, when they could use that cap space to kind of disperse around and fill other holes on the roster as well. And that leads us to option 4, which Adam Schefter of ESPN reported is a strong possibility, that the Ravens use the franchise tag on Judon, and then if Judon decides to sign that tag and kind of give up control of his own future, because he wouldn't be a free agent in that case, the Ravens then could tag and trade Matthew Judon. That means they would send him and his $16.3 million in salary somewhere else. Another team perhaps would pay, maybe if the Ravens can get a third, fourth, maybe even a second-round pick in 2020 draft, they would get, quicker and less complicated compensation than if they tried to get a compensatory draft pick. Compensatory picks are things that, a year after in free agency, the following year, the NFL hands out picks to teams that lost more free agents than they gained. Well, you still got to balance out your free agents and stuff. If you make a trade and you get a third-round pick back for Judon, that's it. You just get that player, and you'd send that $16.3 million in cap money to that other team. So you'd get that third-round pick, you'd get an additional resource, plus you would be able to then, in that case, use that extra money that you would have paid Judon on replacement players or disperse it around the roster. So honestly, that seems like the case where I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best case scenario of tag and trade, but it's a case where the Ravens could guarantee that they get compensation for a player who's been a very good player for them. And it's almost like in the NBA when you see before star, it's a sign and trade in free agency where you can pay a player a certain amount of money. That was on your team, and then you trade him so you get something back in return rather than just letting him go. That's what the Ravens could do there. But in any case, in any of the cases in which Judon leaves, whether they let him walk in free agency, whether they tag and trade him, whether he just doesn't sign the tag and kind of sits out the year or something like that, whatever it is, either the Ravens need Matthew Judon in the fold or they need to identify good replacement players because right now they only have 2 outside linebackers under contract for 2020. And, they've built their defense around a secondary, a very strong secondary, but that doesn't mean you can totally ignore the outside linebacker position. So it'll be very interesting to see what they do with Matthew Judon. And right now, those are kind of the 4 most likely options is either they sign him to a long-term contract, they let him walk in free agency and expect to get compensation the following year, or they use the franchise tag to keep him for 1 year, or they use the franchise tag to trade him. We'll see what happens with Matthew Judon as the offseason unfolds.